We are so happy to have you back here, Brett, in Wisconsin. We're especially happy to have you returning for the Trek 100. You're back. Tell us about that ride and why you keep coming back.
Well, first of all, I enjoy riding. You guys have been just awesome with me and my family and friends. And 4 of my riding buddies are up with me this year. It's a great cause, and we just enjoy doing it.
That's awesome. Tell me about riding at home.
Well, we have a really good cycling community, and a lot of good groups that have. We have a Tuesday afternoon ride. We have a Wednesday ride. We have a Saturday morning and a Sunday afternoon. Of course, you can ride on your own as well. There's a biking, running, walking trail that's really nice. That actually runs from the university up probably three different towns. Probably runs about 50 miles. But most of our biking is start on the trail, eventually get off and go. We're on the public roads and people honk at us and some wave and some kind of give us the number one wave. But I mean, we're not out to win any awards, but it gets competitive, which I like about it. I like the fact that you can stay in shape and still be competitive and not have much wear and tear on your body.
I think many of us have memories of riding a lot as a kid and what that represented. Then perhaps we get away from it for a while and you had some other things to focus on and come back in. Tell me about that, about coming maybe back to cycling or.
Well, yeah, I think my growing up biking would be like most people, it got you to the store or to a friend's house or maybe you jumped over a ramp or something or flipped over a ramp. I think that's fairly typical across the country if you were to poll anyone. So, this type this type of riding that we do is quite different. Bikes are much better, much faster, much lighter. They're geared for the type of riding that we do now. So it's much different. But if you'd have told me prior to retiring that I would ride really any, better yet, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles at a time, I'd have said you're absolutely crazy. But here I am. We're going to ride 60 some odd miles tomorrow and have a blast doing it.
That's awesome. So we talked about riding. What else are you doing these days?
Well, I do a little running, but not this time of year. It's too hot back home. When Mississippi doesn't get very cold, but when it does, and say it's 40 degrees, I'm not. I use that as a running day. So me and my youngest daughter, we ran in a half marathon in December down in Mississippi, and sort of like biking. Had you told me, prior to retiring that I would run a half marathon, I'd have said you're absolutely crazy. Why would I run a half marathon? I wouldn't run at all. So I do that, kind of as a change up sometimes.
So I imagine there are a lot of requests for your time. How do you decide what to say yes to?
That's a good question. It seems like I've said yes more this year than in previous years, and I don't have a really good answer for why that is. Some are paid appearances, some are not. And again, I don't really have a good answer for that. I think sometimes I go off of gut if it feels right. You can't do everything. You can't please everyone. But I like coming here is a no-brainer as long as there's some unforeseen obstacle in the way. I'm going to be here. Deanna would have been here, but she couldn't make it this time. But we love being a part of this and being a part of the MAC Fund. And of course, Wisconsin's like our second home. So, and there's other places that we go and do things. I'm actually playing in the same golf tournament I played in last year. It's I said tournament. It's a 9-hole outing here in Madison. Mm-hmm. And really enjoy doing that. And again, it's the relationship that I have with those guys, American Family Insurance and Steve Stricker and the state makes it much easier to come back year in and year out. I could go down a long list of things that I'm speaking at a Boys and Girls Club in Huntsville, mm-hmm. Tennessee, Huntsville, Alabama. I spoke at a school in Murfreesboro, Tennessee already, and have several more things kind of like that, and again, if it feels right and it doesn't conflict with anything else, I'll do it.
I'm curious, when you speak to kids, when you're at schools, what's your message or your ask of them?
I think I'm pretty simple, because I know when I was their age and knowing kids today and how preoccupied they are with a lot of things that we were not preoccupied with. But even then, back in my early days, you maybe tune in for a brief minute and then you're off in la la land. So I try to be real simple, but I try to tell them the basics. School's important, and there'll always be a success story that someone dropped out, and they can always say school wasn't important for me. But I try to tell them to enjoy what seems to be just agony, school. I couldn't wait to get out of school. I hated school just like everyone else. And I couldn't wait to move on and grow up and be on my own and do this and do that. And, school sucks. And then one day I looked around and I was like, school wouldn't be that bad right now. And it's funny how you kind of go full circle. And I just try to tell kids that, it's probably in one ear and out the other. And I certainly tell that to football players. Enjoy it while you can. Some days, hey, believe me, there was a lot of days I said, this sucks. But in the end, there is a reward. And you try to enjoy each and every day. And it's funny how you look back on, and we all do, we look back on what we thought were like the worst of times or the worst day ever. And you laugh about it. And, so try to soak it all in, and it's never as bad as it really seems. And it's usually never as good as it seems, too.
Fair. That's good advice. So we put together a short list of some keywords, and we thought we'd get your reaction. Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
That's home.
It's home.
Yeah. And where I played, I played at Southern Miss, which is right in the heart of Hattiesburg, and grew up an hour south, and we decided to just make our home in Hattiesburg.
Awesome. Wisconsin.
I would say that's more like our second home, even though we don't own a house here anymore. I do feel like, and Deanna would say the same thing if she were here, that we feel as though, I don't even want to say adopted because that sounds a little unattached. I feel like this is our second home.
Very nice. New Orleans.
I think New Orleans to me, believe it or not, I grew up 50 minutes from New Orleans and hardly ever went over. Now, when I was in college, I went a little bit more for different reasons probably. But, I think about New Orleans and I think about two things really. I think about winning the Super Bowl there, and I think about losing to the Saints when I was with the Vikings in a very tough loss.
Mike Holmgren.
Greatest coach ever. There's no doubt that I would not have been – I probably wouldn't be here right now, which would mean that I would not have been near as successful as I was without him.
Your mother?
I would say The Rock. She would probably say the same thing. She kind of was the glue that kept us all together. You know, I don't know how they did it with 4 kids, never missing a game. We played all the sports, and you know, we were not spaced out enough that only one was playing at a time. It seemed like we were all playing, but they never missed. They both were school teachers, and you know, they were at every event that we were either playing in or participating in.
What about your father?
He would, now if he were alive and he were here, he'd say he was the rock. But I would say, you know, a great deal of my mental and physical toughness came from him, and not in a gentle way. You know, he was more tough love. You know, if I were to ever lay on the field as if I were hurt, or maybe I thought I was hurt, he may go get in his truck and just drive home and not come check on me. You know, and his comment to you would be, well, he's got to learn some way. You know, if he's really hurt, I'll go out there. And that's kind of how he raised us, and it served me well. You know, maybe it wouldn't serve someone else very well, but for me, I was very driven. But it helped to have someone maybe a little more driven than I, especially during those days when you wanted to feel sorry for yourself.
Nice.
He didn't feel too sorry for me.
Oh. Deanna.
Well, you know, I speak of Rock. I mean, there's no doubt that she and I go back. I've actually known Deanna since I was in 1st grade.
Wow.
And she was in 2nd grade, and we lived basically in I wouldn't even say a community. It was kind of like out here in the country. You know, you drive, you don't see nothing, then all of a sudden maybe a little town. That's sort of what we grew up in. But our school was the first grade and the 12th grade classes were all right there. So 1st through 12th was. Now it's so spread out. You know, there's schools all over the place. But so we knew each other, and it was a small setting. So we knew each other, and way before I looked at her like, woo, she's pretty nice looking. She was probably the most athletic other than me on the playground. And so she was like, you know, a challenge. In fact, like when I would get ready for baseball games, she and I would throw. Now I could throw a football to her, but not too hard. But a baseball, there was no ball that she couldn't catch. But you know, just a unbelievable woman.
Awesome. We recently lost Bart Starr.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite Bart Starr story?
You know, I was at his funeral yesterday, and it was actually, as funerals go, it was good. Mm-hmm. It was a celebration. It was a small setting, basically comprised of all family, and then Deanna and I and our oldest daughter, Brittany. Mm-hmm. And the Packers came down. Mark Murphy and Bob Harlan and Larry McCarron and Aaron Rodgers were there. It was great to see them. And just stories were told from a lot of people. Aaron spoke briefly. I spoke briefly. And what I think has been well documented about the letters that I received from Bart after all the games that I played in, and some were good, some were bad. And I say that in a good way. After a tough loss, it was always uplifting, maybe somewhat instructional. And you know what I gather and speaking with everyone yesterday, I'm correct. And Bart was a perfectionist, and everything had to be just right. And otherwise, you know, he wasn't as nice and gentle as everyone knows him to be. Mm-hmm. But my story is one of the letters that I received was right after the Super Bowl, in which we won in New Orleans, and it was congratulations, and it was all good. And he said, you know, I want you to really consider how you wear your hat next time doing a press conference. And I don't remember, and I told the group yesterday, I don't remember if it was backwards or sideways, but it you know, the older generation probably, just like I do now, you know, why do they wear their pants like that? Yeah. So there was a little instruction as he would give from time to time, but that's kind of my funny story with Bart.
That's an awesome story. Last one is Super Bowl.
My first thought would be it's an honor, and it's an extreme honor to win one. To get to one doesn't happen very often. You know, only a small percentage of people get to play in the NFL. And of those, the percentages are even smaller that actually get to a Super Bowl. And of those, the percentages drop, you know, to a speckle of sand that actually win one. And so to be a part of two, unfortunately we lost one, but to win one is, you know, what a wonderful feeling and satisfaction. You know, I don't dwell on the fact that we didn't go more or we didn't win more. Do I wish we would have? Certainly, but I'll take what we have and be proud of it.
I'm going to go back to a couple last questions about riding a bike. So you've had the opportunity to ride with Bo Jackson at his ride and also here. Tell me a story about riding with Bo and maybe just Bo in general. Well,
you know, first to be invited by Bo to ride in his ride, and I think we've done it for 5 years now. You know, the first time I rode in it, we started, Lance Armstrong was up there, and then Bo and myself. And, you know, I'm thinking, I don't know if I can – I mean, I'm assuming Bo Jackson's going to ride like he plays everything else. You know, I got to be on my A game. And about 3 or 4 miles into it, I hear what seemed to be a loud explosion, and he blew a tire. Well, Bo's not – you know, he's not light-footed. And I think a lot of people were joking that Bo did that on purpose so he didn't have to ride the 60-some-odd miles. And after riding that route that day, I realized why, if that were true, why he would do that. It's tough. But, you know, to be invited and to be around Bo and call him a friend, I consider myself lucky. You know, he's a very philanthropic person. But I think the greatest athlete in our generation that any of us will ever see. And I consider myself very lucky, and it's special to be around him.
Wow. You came back to cycling. You got involved in it. You ride a lot now. What advice would you give to people who are new to the sport? Any lessons learned?
Well, I was just on the phone with my agent, Bus, before we started this podcast, and I told him where I was. He said, "Hey, what are you doing?" We live a couple of miles from each other. I said, "I'm actually in Wisconsin." Told him what for. And he said, "You know, I need to get me a bike." And he's serious. Bus has had some hip issues and was a great golfer, loved to run, and hasn't been able to do either really. And I said, "You really need to get on a bike." "I think I'm going to do that." And I said, "But you need to get fitted." Mm-hmm. You know, you learn the hard way, as I did, you know. I said, "I'm not wearing the biking shorts. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that." And when I got off that seat the first time, I said, "Where did I get biking shorts?" And you jump on someone else's bike, and maybe it's a little tall, maybe it's a little too short, but you don't know any different. You'll pay for it. So, you know, get the right setup and, you know, at least look the part initially. Yeah, you know, with cycling, I think the competitive side of me is still there. But I found that, and, you know, for you guys, you've obviously been around it and do it every day and have done it longer than I. There's some strategy that's involved, and I'm still learning that. First of all, and I'm not making excuses, but the guys I ride with are a lot smaller than I. And I'm good going downhill. I gotta get better going up the hill and not look at my weight as a crutch. But there's some strategy involved. I've in fact, one year at Auburn, it was hot, and I thought, if I go fast enough and get through it, I won't need to stop and get anything to drink or stop or even bring a snack with me. And I almost died.
That's a long day.
You do have to prepare, depending on how long the ride is, to drink something, and drink before, and every 15 or so minutes, snack on something. But, my hard-headed self was like, I'm going to blow out in front right here, and then I'm gassed. Or, I had some Fig Newtons, and I said, I'll eat them later. And then I wish I would have eaten them because I'm doing 8 miles per hour up the hill at the end, and they're just gone. So, I really enjoy the learning about it. There's more to it than just getting on a bike. And I mean, if you want to just go out and just have a friendly stroll, that's fine. And I do that as well. But it is fun to kind of say, I'm going to try to get as fast as these guys. And that's a challenge because I'm not as good at cycling as I was at playing quarterback. And I'm really mediocre. And I've gotten better. I've gotten faster. And the equipment's great. I'm obviously not plug and trek, but I am plug and trek. The equipment is great, but you still have to pedal.
Hey.
So I'm a work in progress.
How about a favorite place to ride? Do you have one?
We went to Aspen last year for just for a summer vacation. Me and Deanna and our youngest daughter and a couple of our friends, and Deanna and I brought my bike, and I had Stitch set me up with the trek place there in Aspen, and got Deanna a bike for the week. And I want to say some of the hills I ride back home seem like a mountain. Well, I thought it was a mountain, and we did the local climb, what's called Maroon Bells. It's like 8 or 9 miles straight up, and just pack a lunch because don't get in a hurry. And the scenery and just absolutely beautiful. It gives you a different appreciation for what these true cyclers are climbing hills and Tour de France, or that's a whole different animal when we're talking about athletes, what they can do.